Welcome to the Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce webinar hosted by the Chamber Young Professionals Division. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate in this event. My name is Deacon. I'm the Division Chair for the Chamber Young Professionals. Fort Bend Chamber is the only 5-star accredited chamber in the greater Houston region. As the advocates for excellence in Fort Bend and beyond, the Chamber serves both our business partners and our community. Before we get started today and before I make some introductions, I did want to recognize our sponsor for this webinar, Allegiance Bank in Stafford. We have Brian here with us. Brian, would you like to say a few words to our attendees?
Sure, yes. On behalf of Allegiance Bank, I just want to let everybody know we're happy to sponsor this. It's a very strange and kind of crazy time we're all living through right now. And it's like day-to-day adjustments that we're all having to make. And I'm very interested to hear Dr. Crawley's insight on how the best strategies are to deal with this going forward. So I think it's helpful to everyone, in particular the small business community, and that's who our target market is, the small business owners. So anything we can do to help with that, we're happy to engage in.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate it, Brian, and thank you to Allegiance Bank for your generosity and support.
Sure thing.
So before I introduce our presenter, and I wanted to tell everyone in the audience about the chat feature. I'm not sure if you've attended any of these with Kevin. I know Kevin's been keeping busy doing a lot of them, but we have the chat feature and at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them at the bottom of your screen in the chat dialog box. And we'll address those questions after Professor Crawley concludes his presentation. Our Business and Professional Division Chair, Kevin, is joining us on the call today. He's a small business owner and a professional who has experienced the recessions over the year, and his insight is appreciated. He's going to kind of help us at the end and go back and forth with Dr. Crawley on a few questions. Professor Crawley. So at this time, I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, Professor David Crawley. Professor Crawley teaches at the University of Houston College of Technology. He's a certified innovation professional and published senior executive for reputational risk, management, corporate intelligence, technology, branding, and emerging market development. His background includes working with energy and engineering companies such as Exxon, Nabors, KBR, FMC Technologies, Southwestern Energy, and others. His consumer activities involve retail marketing for Sonic Drive-In and packaged goods for PepsiCo business units in Europe and America that included co-launching Frito-Lay Russia. His pioneering experience also includes working with startups and building business models for population-based computing around the globe with HP. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Professor David Crawley.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share some of the things we're doing at the University of Houston College of Technology. Moving on to the presentation, the dynamic factor that we're all encountering right now is that we are in a state of turbulence, and innovation thrives in turbulence. There's the dynamics of understanding how to develop something that you haven't been doing before. And moving on to the next slide, I have to ask everyone some of these core questions. Do you know what innovation is? And that there's something very important about innovation. What does it mean to businesses, and in particular also to young professionals? And how do you not just define innovation as a competitive advantage, but also how do you build a culture? And next. So here's the question of today. Did you walk on the sidewalk? Have you walked on the sidewalk? Do you realize that if you go at any time during the university or even just out on downtown, you will notice thousands of people every day going thousands of feet and yards and meters out of their way to get to the destination that everybody else is going to as well. And the problem with that is that there's somebody who's faster, smarter, quicker, whatever the issues are, that gives them a competitive advantage. they can arrive at the destination before you. So what happens then is that when you stay on the sidewalk, you're just following the herd. You're doing what you've always been done. And the problem with that is like, you're almost like a herd of sheep or a line of ants. And if you ever look at a line of ants, if you interrupt their line, they don't know what to do. And that's the challenge, because when you're confronted with disruption, if you keep doing what you've always been doing, you're not going to get any more result than the disruption that you're currently involved in. So you have to ask yourself, why are you walking on the sidewalk? Because there's no gun to your head. And the problem is when people start thinking that innovation is strictly an opinion, you come up with issues like this, which my favorite is the chairman of IBM said that there's only a world market for 5 computers. And moving, I want to visit on the subject of innovation. Innovation is not a concept. It's not just about creativity. The center point, of course, but it's putting the discipline of innovation. It's about the skills of innovation. And we have created these programs that will be also at the Sugar Land campus from the College of Technology. And we have state-approved degrees that were approved last year, undergraduate degree, a minor degree, and skills of all based around the skills of innovation, which also is a graduate degree in these 3 programs. To understand the dynamics then, we see technology as a development of the application of tools. In other words, you manage technology, technology doesn't manage you. Our programs are founded on the principles of innovation engineering. It's been around for 35 years. It's been taught at university level for the past 14 years. And then of course, in our construction management programs, we bring in Six Sigma, and we also have project management certificates. But the innovation as a skill set is embedded in the innovation engineering principles. That was founded, by the way, around Edwards Deming's principles of engineering. So we have to then ask ourselves, what is innovation? Innovation is meaningfully unique ideas. It's got to mean something to somebody, and it's got to be unique. Certainly unique to the occasion, but preferably unique to the world. Now, this is absolutely important because the impediment of creating innovation is fear. So the formula is meaningful, unique equals stimulus to the power of diversity over fear. Fear is the biggest hurdle. You know, you have to step forward and be brave. And so why does this matter? Well, innovation, when you develop it and use it as a skill, it's repeatable and it's consistent and scalable. It solves problems. It improves lives. It certainly creates opportunity. And what's important here is it recognizes change not as a problem or, oh my God, we have a disruption. It recognizes change as pivots. And that means that you're in control of the change. But you have to understand that failure is part of the process of success. And most importantly in that is that innovations, when they're deployed as a skill in a consistent manner that identifies unmet needs and solves problems, and creates new, unique ways of doing things that outmaneuvers the competition. Ross Perot said back in the 80s to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in a speech, he said, the best way to compete in the marketplace is to change the rules on the competition. And you do that with your mind, with deployed in skill sets, which is innovation. And moving on, why does it matter to young professionals to learn innovation skills? Well, it creates opportunity. But not only that, opportunity is agnostic. You can deploy it not just in your career, not just into the business that you're working with, but in your personal life as well. And 95% of employers surveyed by the Association of American Colleges said that they consider students who have innovation skills as hireable candidates. They can build their company around these people. But why does it matter to companies? Well, in a survey that General Electric did for over 2,000 business executives, 74%, right? That's 3 out of 4, said that the lack of innovation skills is an impediment on their company's progress. But here's what's compounding the fact that there's a huge skills gap in the marketplace. You have the degradation of skills over time. McKinsey reports that it's 6 times over, almost half by 6 years. But then you have a large group of people retiring right now. In the energy industry, it's roughly around 32-ish or so. But when you take that and you're bringing the skill degradation, the skills gap, and then you have a new generation entering the workforce who are unprepared with the innovation skills, because everything's going to be in a state of flux. The rapid pace of technology is moving so fast that the ability to keep up with this, pardon me, the ability to keep up with the pace of the technology is really falling behind, because mostly, I have no idea, mostly it has a lot to do with the fact that technology companies are coming up with great solutions. But the problem with the great solutions is that they don't have a workforce that they're selling into that has the ability to use those solutions to solve problems and scale across an enterprise. So there's actually an impediment going on right now in the marketplace that kind of inhibits technology companies' ability to perform. Moving on. So what we mentioned earlier is innovation thrives in disruption, and there's a reason for that. And most of that is because innovation in and of itself causes disruption. But disruption causes opportunity if you're able to manage it, use your systems, develop unique ways to pivot. And from opportunity, you're able to change the world. You're able to change your world. You're able to change your business. And in particular, you're able to build. But the challenges with innovation is that it requires discipline. And in particular, in Edward Demings, he says the skill sets for discipline is plan, do, study, act, or in particular, plan, do, check, act. And whatever system you use, Accenture calls it agile development. Whatever system you use, you should have a system that gives a degree of confidence in the people as they step off the sidewalk, so to speak, and as they're moving forward. What we found is that those companies that embraced innovation during times of turbulence, for example, back in 2008, that those who embraced innovation were able to increase their sales 84% versus those that did not. And there's 3 primary factors, right? The leadership encouraged innovation. The innovators reinvented their product capabilities, and then they found new ways to find customers that were more profitable. And moving on. So how do you build that competitive edge culture, right? Because innovation as a skill set can be taught to everyone. That's very important to understand. So first you have to make sure that what you're doing, the teams that are involved feel that it makes a difference. It's cool stuff. It makes a difference to them, or makes a difference to the customer, or certainly makes a difference to your company. And you gotta stop saying no. When people start hearing the word no, they start shutting down. And what happens is when people start shutting down or they keep hearing the word no a lot, they become reactive and they spend most of their time putting out fires or reworking issues. And that's not an efficient way for a company to be spending its time. And then once again, and we'll speak about this periodically through the presentation, is discipline. You got to have systems thinking or agile development, but these tools and communication skills gives everybody a sense of where they're going, how they're going to do it, and what's expected of them. And it also puts transparency in the process so that there's really, no real hidden secrets here. Everybody get a sense of where everybody's going and what their next steps are. So moving forward then, right, and continuing the conversation of building a competitive edge culture, innovation is generally succeeded when a team follows a proven process. Understanding, once again, and we'll say this several times, failure is a necessity. And which is really a challenge for everybody, which is where the fear factor comes in, is because we've always been confronted by the third grade teacher that caused us to be embarrassed because we didn't know the answer when we were called on. But there has to be trust, because when people feel that they're working with the system, and whatever the system may be, we happen to favor a particular system, but as long as you have a system and the people understand it and they know where it's going, they have a sense of trust in that. Just follow the system. It may not be exactly the way people feel comfortable doing it, but when they follow the system, they eventually get to the end result. But most importantly, in all of these activities, when you're developing innovation, is you should establish processes that allows you to identify problems, fail fast, fail cheap, get out, don't invest a lot of money in something that you just can't get around. The challenge is that if you give a lot of people, smart people in particular, enough time to think about it, they'll overwork it.
And David, is it okay to ask you a question during, or you want to wait till the end?
Sure, by all means.
So I know for myself as a commercial real estate broker and small business owner, the fear of failing is significant do you have any guidance as to, to our audience possibly, or to our small business, because most of the people on this call are small business owners, as we talk about innovation, how to get over that fear? I know what I've done is to test things, ideas that I have to innovate, how I get lead generation, for instance, test them before I spend a whole lot of money doing it. So that's kind of how I've gotten over the fear of doing things. But just wanted to know if you had any other guidance as it pertains to, being innovative, but also with small business owners, every dollar means something. So.
Well, absolutely. And one of the biggest ways to get around that in the ideation stage, right, is stimulus. How do you get your stimulus? See, we have a tendency to have been taught brainstorming. We pull it out of our brains, right? And we refer to that as like brain sucking. It's just a library. You're only able to come up with something that you currently know about right now. So, you find ways to stimulate your brain. We learned a long time ago that you can't grow more brain cells, unfortunately. But what you can do is increase the connections of the neurons in your brain. And so a lot of people, when they go to Google to search for a particular company, Google a question. Gather information. Mind mapping is one of the most profound ways of getting people to create. And we've done this at the Fort Bend Independent School District and several high schools, where we would gather people together in teams and come up with a new flashlight, understanding that that a flashlight is just a beam of light. We had lights on slippers, lights on gloves. So you have to be willing to understand that other ideas provoke other ideas. Everything is cause and effect. It's a catalyst effect. But when you're going into the process of what to do with this idea after you bounced it around and groomed it, is when you go through these cycles of plan, do, study, act, you want to break your path, so to speak, into milestones. And this is part of agile development, so that when you're developing each milestone and the milestones can be built on time, which is important, but you want to identify what your death threats are. And we can go to the next slide. And this is an idea of that fail fast, fail cheap, right? Because we just don't want to understand what that death threat is. And let's call it for what it is. Be real. When you look at your pathway to make your idea happen, a death threat is real. If you keep saying, oh, we don't have problems, we have challenges. Okay, the dynamic factor is people know what a problem is, regardless what you call it. Subconsciously, they know. And they will develop risk avoidance scenarios so that they don't have to engage that problem. Or you have some that are, really, strong type A, alpha, warriors, whatever. They'll engage that problem with vigor. Okay, but you're trying to build a team. You're trying to build a culture. And so state it for what it is and deal with it for what it is. And have a process when you go through so that when you're able to pre-identify what potential problems you will encounter, you will have an understanding of what are your options to move around that. And then you test those. And so by being prepared, by identifying what your problems might be before you start down the path, gives you the ability to have a mindset that you respond to problems. You don't go, oh my goodness, what do I do now? You're already in the dynamic of identified a problem. These are the steps I'm going to go through to resolve it or prove it. And you want to prove it. And when you break your program out into many milestones, when you confront a problem and you can't solve it, you can isolate it. And when you isolate it, then you keep the progress moving on the other elements. And unless it's something that just says an outright, it will downright kill it. If you can't pivot from that, then fine, make the decision. But these should be steps that you go through before you dump a lot of money in it.
So what I hear you saying is the mastermind is important, especially if you're independent small business owners, where you get people that are maybe in your circle to go through this process. Once you've identified these steps, maybe have some other people look at it or whiteboard it or get in a room. So if I'm in commercial real estate, Brian is a commercial lender, getting some folks that are kind of in that general space to kind of look at, what you're talking about, so that you might, because there might be some death threats out there that you're not aware of because you're in your own head. There you go.
And one of the ways that you can prove your concept to be valid is crowdsourcing. One of, at Frito-Lay, we had a real big problem when the chips were coming out of the fryer, they had a lot of oil on them. And they went down a conveyor belt and it shook. And unfortunately, it broke a lot of the chips. So they went out to work with NASA. But you can do this with MailChimp, should you care to do so, or with friends and family. And you ask them for what's the idea of solutions, and you propose the problem, as a mission. And the solution they came up, they discovered is that it was from a violinist. And a violinist in New York said, well, why don't you use sonic vibration? And today, in a lot of Frito-Lay plants, they use sonic vibration to vibrate the chips that tosses the oil off without breaking them.
David, I like the little broken up chips, but that's just me. But no, but I understand what you're saying as far as just having people in your space to talk through these things.
Yeah, you know, the idea didn't come from a manufacturing guru or even a scientist, right? It came from a violin player.
Wow.
And so, you know, the diversity, right? When you have people that don't necessarily agree, they may not like each other, that's okay. You know, as Steve Jobs put it, getting these different personalities that are like rocks that are being polished, you know, they're banging up against each other, but at the outcome, as long as they're focused on the process and a conclusion, right, they come out with a really refined, smooth idea. And then they can take that and you can use what's called a Julian chart, which is like scale of 1 to 10. And what we found is that an idea, an innovation, should be 60% meaningful and 40% unique. So you can actually, on a grid of 1 to 10, ask a couple questions and be able to then define the value of your idea before you spend a lot of money on it. The
key part, yes. I've spent, especially during the Great Recession, we'll get to that, but I remember looking for one solution after another, spending money, and so that death threat is real when it comes to trying to, you know, use your limited resources again for most small business owners. Yeah. And
side hustling, right? I mean, you know, a lot of people do side hustles that evolve into really good businesses, and this is important. When you look at how you build those ideas, there's a very good chance that your solution will come from somebody you don't even know, or it'll be unique. It may be in the Philippines, but it's never been done here.
Yeah, yeah, and John Jeffers commented, and you're right, John. So let me say this now: make an effort to include people who aren't too familiar with your business, who aren't in your inner circle, and who therefore are likely to think differently than you do, and maybe can help you identify a new breakthrough idea.
Absolutely, John. And John's got a lot of experience in this. He's actually a certified black belt in innovation engineering.
Got you.
Highly successful in the team. Thanks for chiming in, John.
Yeah.
We can move to the next one. So here we are, right? We're in the brain sucking method. This is what happens after about an hour of trying to figure it out on your own. And moving to this is, you know, how do we create the stimulus where the brain becomes an operating system? It's calibrating, it's matching, because let's understand one thing about innovation. It's an association of ideas. It's not just one. You're pulling ideas from different things and you're mashing them together. So you want to explore the stimulus. You want to leverage that diversity, leverage different people, MailChimp, however you can build these different ideas to validate it. And this is the challenge that a lot of people have, because they come up with ideas and they don't want to be told no. Once again, right? And they don't want to feel like their idea isn't really exact the way it is. But what's important is that you drive out this fear and make your idea better by the more times you revise it. Revision is only the pathway to perfection. So the discipline process, because now we're down to this. It's plan, do, study, act. These are the dynamic factors within each one of these. And when you get down to act, and by the way, this presentation will obviously be made available to others that they can spend more time. I'm trying not to actually just read the slides, but in particular, when you get down to act, you know, your decision through these cycles, because everything's a cycle, right? That's how you move through these milestones. You know, everything's a cycle. And so at each cycle, you either say, great, you know, we succeeded, or we're it's not worth the effort. It's going to cost too much money, too many resources. It's just not going to get there where we want it to be. Or you just repeat the cycle and you go through your death threats and prove those out, because you have to prototype your death threats. And this is all part of the dynamics of rapid prototyping. There was even Procter & Gamble made a decision several years ago that trying to keep everything secret and quiet and building out a full business plan that would take 6 months to build out, what they're doing is building a microsite, pushing it out on the web, creating search engine optimization, and seeing if anybody will come. And for them, that's a rapid prototyping. And so for those who are into side hustles, digital media is probably one of your best means to get out there and see if anybody will buy it. And so when you look then at the pillars of an innovation culture, there's 4. There's technology skills. You have to empower your employees. You can optimize your workforce. You want to spend a little bit of time in coaching and training your people, and you want to always be focused on rapid prototyping, which is what we talked about. You know, there's crowdsourcing. You can create cloud sandboxes, which is like taking your technology solution, pushing it in the cloud, and have other people engage with it. There's even people are moving to virtual manufacturing. There's immersive realities like AR or VR, which is becoming real popular in the energy industry, in training people remotely. You want to game out the disruption scenarios wherever you can, right? Which is what we talked about. Then, of course, optimizing your workforce, this is really important, is take the time to understand that it's important to train your people, especially if you have are reliant upon a knowledge base of your employees. Your workforce skills is critical, and they need to be refreshed. And then moving to the next one, the process works something like this: design, develop, and deliver. And this is how one of the key ways that a company moves forward out of disruption, or in this particular market, the way it is today. And so the next slide is I want to say thank you, because that's the conclusion. But always try to remember, the primary objective is to step off the sidewalk, because there's no gun to your head. And if there's questions, by all means.
Sure, David. Thank you so much for that presentation. Our CEO of the Fort Bend Chamber asked a good question, so I guess we'll start with that. And for those of you that are out there, we would encourage you to ask questions via the chat feature. You can raise your hand with the raise hand button, or you can put it in the Q&A as well. But Carrie asked, how do you detect if someone is innovative in the hiring process? What would you look for, David, if during the hiring process to see if this person has the chops possibly to be innovative?
You want to try to assess whether they think as a process. Do they have critical thinking skills? Are they able to see a situation and break it down into variables? That's the dynamic. When people see chaos, they just see a mess. But what happens is your mind files things like a file folder, and we put headers on top of the mental file folders. And then we just start, it's called chunking, where you just start dropping things into those folders. And those, and they're variables. Everything, even an idea, can be broken down into variables. And then the logic model is, are they able to understand that you can align those variables in a sequential order? that leads to a complete story. And that's one of the key ways that you can make something, where you can make opportunity out of chaos. If you go into a room that's completely cluttered and you try to come up with something right then, you're going to have a hard time. So when you're interviewing people, you want to see if they think in a manner that they can create their ideas and explain them in stages.
And so one of the things, and again, I think a lot of people on the call are small to medium-sized business owners. And so one of the things that I know that I think about is, so I've been in business now for this is my 22nd year in business. And so I've had 2.5 recessions in the late 90s that we dealt with, a tech boom bust, then the Great Recession, 06, 07, 08, and for me, 09 and into 10, and then now, which this one's different. So one of the questions I had for you, as we talk about innovation, you mentioned it in your presentation, that a lot of innovation comes through chaos, or going back to chaos theory, basically, there's opportunity. But going back to the Great Recession, or the recessions in the past that you've been a part of and seen, what are maybe 3 to 5 lessons that some of these business owners could apply today as it pertains to innovation? Are there any things that you can think of back in the 06, 07, 08, and again for me, 09 and 10 a recession that you could give people some tools or tips during that time?
Yeah. One of the challenges that people have when they start looking at coming up with something new or different, right? They immediately try to come up with the solution, the end result. And to be blunt, we're trained that way. We spend, and we see the process in a linear manner. And you can blame that on the Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford figured out that you could, produce thousands of cars, in a couple days, or certainly in a week or in a month. And stop. Don't try to define what the solution is supposed to be. Define what the mission is. Define what you feel are the important objectives that you are to attain, not the solution. Because if you focus first in the beginning stages on the solution, meaning this is my idea, everything you're going to do is going to be composed to make that real. And that may not be what you're going to end up. The objective is to solve the mission. And a lot of people, when they engage, they are trained to think in a linear manner, all right, on the sidewalk, and they're doing things the way they've always done them before. And so the objective here is define what your mission is, define what the problem is, right? And then define what the mission is, and then go through the stimulation process before you come up with the solution. You should probably come up with 3 or 4 or 5 solutions in the process of, with these making sense to the mission of what you're trying to achieve. And then through that exercise, you'll find that, if one idea becomes a death threat and you can't do it, you've got others that you can move forward with, or mash what works with that one and bring it over to the other one. Most great ideas did not start out as the solution. They start out as what people thought was going to be the solution, and then it had been revised like 6 or 7 or 8 times or more, certainly through the rapid prototyping. And here's the dynamic factor when you're into proving your concept. You can actually prototype an idea. And part of that is what we talked about, you know, where you get your idea together, then you approach other people and just ask them what they think about it. And that's okay. The important thing is that you're getting input that you can then consider, and that stimulates your brain, because no matter what you hear, there's a cause and effect to everything. And so no matter what you hear, you apply that to your idea or your challenge, and then you can grow and build. And even if it's not a great idea, but you have to look at it as provoking you to think in a different way about the particular solution that you're attempting to develop. And one of the challenges that people had during these recessionary periods is they kept trying to do what they normally always did that got them through whatever problem they'd encountered. But yet it's different now, right? Because if it was okay, doing what you would do normally would work, but it doesn't anymore. So they either just buckle down to survive. I'm going to save money. I'm going to close my doors. I'm going to just back up. Or you can confront it, use these processes that we talked about and how we looked at innovation, which is really critical thinking and logic modeling, and build these skill sets and use these tools in a manner that you can start creating an ecosystem that allows you to exploit it.
Yeah, you know, speaking of that, you're right. Even in 2008, I can remember just trying to buckle down and I'm just going to work through it. I'm going to do what I was doing beforehand to try to generate business. And that was just like sinking a ship or just digging a deeper hole. And so going back to one of your slides, as far as technology is concerned, I know that I started using to get in contact with commercial property owners, technology that had come up, and I still use it to source opportunities that were more likely to be opportunities. So using technology, again, to be innovative in how I market it, as an example of what you're saying, which is not something that I was doing before. One of the questions that we have, and I think this is from Paige. Paige asks, do you have any tips on how to motivate employees through a time like this? How do you keep employees from getting discouraged, to keep them thinking and moving towards your company's mission?
Well, it can be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
What they did with the Pepsi program is they gave $1,000 to the person that had the best idea.
Well, hey, money.
Yeah.
Paige, there's your answer right there. Just Carrie, she wants $1,000. I'm just letting you know.
Sure. And NASA does that crowdsourcing thing a lot. They base a big chunk of their innovation on crowdsourcing. So, you know, you send, you put your employees maybe in teams, because people work really good in teams, and teams of 3, give them a financial reward, give them time, right? One of the ways you might do is give them a questionnaire or some kind of form that they fill out. I could send it to you. I've got one from my career at Young and Rubicam, where, you know, employees answer all these questions about the business and what they see and what they think are good ideas. And then from there, right, they can then, from their groups, you could swap what people say and you swap it to the next group so that they know what they said, right? And then everybody else participate as well. So you're stimulating your thoughts on what other people are thinking. And that's all right, you know, friendly competition. But what you end up doing is you give a graded scale of reward. Like maybe one person gets like the idea, or the team gets the idea, and the second team and the third team, however you want to reward that. And maybe you don't want to swap the, you know, the questionnaires amongst each other. That's fine too. the idea is you want to get them to work together. You want to get them to contribute ideas together, because it's amazing what employees see that the owner doesn't. And you know, there's such a thing as rewarding them. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it should be something other than just having a job.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read studies that talked about that actually, as far as employee motivation, money is not on the top of the list. Typically, recognition in some type of way is one of the top things that people want, and or, you know, a prize or something of that nature. But recognition is actually, if you look at studies, higher than money. So that definitely does it. One of the things that came up in kind of preparing for this is I wanted to hear from you as it pertains to, can you teach someone or can someone learn to be innovative? Can you learn to be innovative? And if so, you know, how what's that general process?
Well, we've got 3 degrees at the University of Houston College of Technology. You can get a minor degree that focus primarily on the applied skills. So it's strictly skills based, and it's called applied innovation. And then we have technology leadership and innovation management, which puts more leadership aspect, you know, of managing a business, a technology business in particular. And you actually get a blue belt certification in innovation engineering when you take the first class of principles. And it goes through all these different steps of how do you create an idea? How do you stimulate yourself? How do you work with others? How do you compose your idea? You know, how do you write a mission statement? And so we've done this with some businesses in Houston where we've gone to at the request of the business, where we'll do a 4-hour workshop. We don't charge for this. This is just part of our way of giving back to the community. And we would write the mission statement, because everything has to start with the mission, right? And then we go through some preliminary research, so to speak, to find stimulating topics that are relevant and challenge the mission. And then we develop a workshop around mind mapping. So we take like however many people want to participate from the company that they allow, and we've had as many as 40 people in a room. We broke them out into teams of 5. We gave them the challenge from the mission, and then they were to develop ideas using the mind mapping, and each person was to come up with 3 ideas. Now, this is a technique, this is a tool. So this is a discipline, mind mapping of innovation. So they actually learn this process in the workshop. And the company provides fajitas or pizza or, you know, whatever's right for the lunch. And then in the end, they write their idea in a template that takes them through the critical thinking logic modeling phase of being able to describe their idea. And then if each person comes up with 2 or 3 ideas or more, generally sometimes, then you end up at the end of that session with about 70 ideas. And out of 70, you probably have 20 that are worthwhile, but everybody votes on the top 3. And then you walk out of that event with 3 hardcore solid ideas that can then go through the plan, do, study, act phases of rapid prototyping the idea to get it to where it's relevant to spend money on. See, way too many people, when they come up with an idea, they're trying to go straight to market. They're ready to just dump money in it. They're ready to go with it. And they don't spend maybe a couple weeks or a month going through and basically torturing it till it confesses.
Yeah. Trust me, I've been there. I've been there on my dollar. So, in the interest of time, David, I just wanted to see if you had any final comments after you do that. Then we can kind of toss it back over to Nick. We really do again appreciate you being on with us today. But any closing comments?
I just really appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts and what the degrees are doing at the Sugar Land campus and providing, because it's important for us to approach this season with the intent that we're going to emerge stronger than when it began.
Amen. And by the way, for those of you out there, you should check out that new technology building. It's something to see. It's really, really very, very nice. Toured it a couple of times and had Chambers had a couple of events over there. So really, really nice. Right off of 59, you can see it nice and pretty sitting up there. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nick. It's your show, brother.
Thanks, Kevin. So thank you, Professor Crawley, for that presentation. We would also want to thank Allegiance Bank again for sponsoring, Allegiance Bank and Stafford for their generosity in sponsoring. I would like to make you guys aware of a couple of upcoming events that we have. So the Chamber Young Professional, we held our first, I guess, virtual event last month. It was a Trivingo. We have another one coming up Thursday, June 25th. And we're going to have that, of course, on Zoom. So please join us for the bingo and trivia fun. If you're interested in joining other webinars that the Chamber is hosting, please view the Chamber calendar at fortbendchamber.com for additional details and to register. And of course, thank you guys all for attending this informative presentation with Professor David Crawley. The recording of this webinar will be available within 48 hours on the Chamber website under the Chamber Young Professionals Division tab and on YouTube. So with that, I guess we will end it.